I never thought my own mother and stepfather would lock me away, all for the sake of the inheritance. But I could never have guessed how everything would change the moment the police arrived. My life took a sharp turn just before I turned 18. It was a day that began like any other, but ended in a way I never imagined. Let me take you back to where it all started, back to the day my world unraveled. It all began with my parents, Richard and Sarah. For years, their marriage was a stormy sea. My father, Richard, had been the manager of my maternal grandfather's textile firm, a company worth a staggering $150 million. He was dedicated to it, but the tension between him and my mother was relentless. Sarah was resentful of my father's involvement in the business. She often criticized him for not being able to manage the firm as she saw fit. The strain came to a head one cold, rainy evening. The house was eerily quiet as my parents had a heated argument in their bedroom. I remember hearing Sarah's angry voice, punctuated by the sound of things being thrown. I was only 15 at the time, and I had no idea what was happening. All I knew was that something was wrong. Months passed, and the arguments grew worse. My father seemed more distant, retreating into his work at the textile firm while my mother's bitterness simmered. It was no surprise when one day my father packed his bags and left us. I saw the hurt in his eyes as he said goodbye, but I was too stunned to react. He left Houston, leaving me and my younger brother, Tyler, behind. Things quickly took a darker turn. Sarah, feeling betrayed and desperate to regain control, accused my father of cheating on her. The accusations were harsh, and I struggled to believe them. What was even more shocking was her swift remarriage to Luke, a man I had only met a handful of times. Luke was charming, but there was something about him that didn't sit right with me. He had this air of manipulation about him, though I couldn't quite place it. Soon after the wedding, Sarah and Luke made a decision that would alter my life forever. They announced that they were moving to another city to expand the textile business. It was a calculated move, not just to grow the business, but also to distance themselves from the mess left behind. I was left behind in Houston, feeling abandoned and betrayed. My only solace was my maternal grandfather, who took me in. Grandfather was a strong, wise man in his 70s. He had built the textile firm from the ground up, and his legacy was as much a part of Houston as he was. He welcomed me into his home with open arms. The comfort and stability he provided were like a balm to my wounded spirit. He had always been a figure of strength for me, and now, more than ever, I needed that. Living with grandfather was a refuge. His home was a sanctuary from the chaos that had become my life. He was supportive and understanding, always there with kind words and wise advice. It was during this period of relative peace that I started to find some clarity about my situation. Then came my graduation day. It was supposed to be a day of joy and accomplishment, but it turned into something far more significant. I remember walking across the stage, feeling a mixture of pride and apprehension. Little did I know that the day would mark the beginning of an entirely new chapter. After the ceremony, grandfather called me into his study. The room was filled with the familiar smell of old books and leather. He sat behind his large mahogany desk, his face solemn but resolute. I could tell something important was about to happen. "Emma," he began, "I have something for you." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a set of documents. My heart raced as he handed them to me. They were papers related to the textile firm, and I could barely comprehend what I was seeing. Grandfather explained that he had decided to pass on full control of the company to me. He bypassed Sarah and Luke entirely, choosing to entrust the business to me instead. The decision was both overwhelming and bewildering. I was only 17, and the weight of managing a $150 million enterprise was daunting. Grandfather's eyes were filled with a mix of pride and concern as he spoke. "You are capable, Emma, but there are things you need to understand about the family and the business. You should talk to your father about it. There are unresolved matters that only he can shed light on." The revelation was a shock. My mind was spinning as I tried to process the responsibility that now lay on my shoulders. My mother and her new husband had been kept out of this decision, and I knew their reaction would be anything but pleased. Still, I was determined to prove myself worthy of grandfather's trust. That night, as I lay in bed, My thoughts were a whirlwind of emotions, excitement, fear, and uncertainty. I was on the brink of adulthood and faced with a responsibility that most people would never encounter. But the future was now mine to shape, and despite the turmoil and the weight of the past, I was ready to face it. This was only the beginning of a journey that would test my strength, challenge my beliefs, and force me to confront the complexities of trust and betrayal. But for now, all I could do was prepare for the next steps, knowing that the path ahead was as uncertain as it was formidable. The night that changed everything began like any other, with the comforting routine of grandfather's home. I had spent the day absorbing the enormity of my new responsibility and trying to mentally prepare for the challenges ahead. But that night, as I tried to sleep, the peace of my grandfather's home was shattered. It all started when Sarah and Luke learned about my inheritance. I didn't know it at the time, but their reaction was swift and ruthless. They were determined to regain control of the textile firm at any cost. Their desperation was palpable, and their actions were driven by greed and a sense of entitlement. Around midnight, I was jolted awake by the sound of someone knocking on the front door. At first, I thought it was a late-night visitor or perhaps a mistake. But when I heard grandfather's voice, the tone urgent and strained, I knew something was wrong. I slipped out of bed and tiptoed down the hallway, my heart pounding. As I approached the living room, I saw Sarah and Luke standing in the doorway. Their smiles were forced, and their eyes held a glint that made my skin crawl. They had come under the guise of reconciliation, claiming they wanted to make amends and discuss the future of the family business. I was too stunned to react, too tired to question their motives. "Emma, sweetheart, we need to talk," Sarah said with a veneer of sweetness that made my skin itch. Grandfather, always the gracious host, let them in, though I could see the unease in his eyes. He led them to the sitting room, where we all took our seats. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Sarah and Luke's smiles were now more like predatory grins. It wasn't long before the true nature of their visit became horrifyingly clear. As soon as grandfather stepped away to get us some refreshments, Sarah and Luke moved swiftly. They seized the moment and cornered me. Sarah's expression hardened as she said, "Emma, we need you to sign over control of the textile firm to us. It's only fair, considering your father's actions and our investment." My stomach churned. "What are you talking about? I've been given control of the company by grandfather. Why would I sign it over to you?" Before I could react further, Luke grabbed my arm with a force that shocked me. "This is not up for discussion, Emma," he said coldly. "We need that company." Panic surged through me as they forcibly dragged me towards a room at the end of the hallway. I struggled, but their strength was overwhelming. Luke's grip was like iron, and Sarah's eyes were filled with a mix of malice and satisfaction. They shoved me into the room and locked the door behind them. My heart raced as I realized I was trapped. The room was small and windowless, with only a single dim light bulb hanging from the ceiling. I pounded on the door and shouted, but my cries were met with silence. The reality of my situation began to sink in. I was held captive by my own mother and her new husband, with no way to escape. Fear coursed through me as I sank to the floor, my mind racing. I had always known that Sarah and Luke were manipulative, but this level of deceit and betrayal was beyond anything I had anticipated. I tried to calm my breathing, focusing on the small window at the top of the door, hoping someone might hear me. Hours felt like days as I remained locked in that room. The house was eerily quiet, and I could hear muffled conversations through the door. I could only make out fragments, but it was clear that Sarah and Luke were plotting their next moves, discussing how to leverage my signature to gain control of the company. In my isolation, I couldn't help but think of grandfather and how he had always been my protector. The fact that Sarah and Luke had managed to deceive him and gain entry into his home was a bitter pill to swallow. The thought of them taking over the textile firm and ruining everything grandfather had built was unbearable. Just when I felt the despair creeping in, I heard the faint sound of footsteps in the hallway. I held my breath, straining to listen. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied by voices that seemed increasingly frantic. My heart leapt with hope. Could it be someone coming to rescue me? The 2 days that followed felt like a blur of fear and uncertainty. Being locked in that room had left me shaken, and every minute seemed to stretch endlessly. I could only imagine what was happening outside those walls, but it wasn't until I heard muffled voices that I realized just how dire the situation had become. Grandfather had always been a man of sharp instincts. He had known me well enough to sense that something was terribly wrong when I didn't appear for meals or respond to calls. His concern grew with each passing hour. I later learned that he had been trying to reach me, growing increasingly anxious as he realized that Sarah and Luke had not left as they had claimed. On the second night of my captivity, while Sarah and Luke were deep in their plotting, Grandfather, unable to ignore his mounting worry, decided to investigate. He tiptoed down the hall, hoping to find some sign of me. As he approached the door to my room, he noticed that it was slightly ajar. He peered inside and saw the room was empty, but the situation was far from ordinary. Grandfather, ever the observant man, noticed Sarah and Luke huddled in the living room, their voices hushed but urgent. His curiosity got the better of him, and he crept closer, trying to catch what they were saying. From where he stood, he could hear them discussing their plans in low, conspiratorial tones. "We need to ensure Emma doesn't escape." Sarah's voice was laced with frustration. "She's the only thing standing between us and the textile firm." Luke's voice followed, cold and calculated. "We can't afford any mistakes. If she tries anything, we'll need to have her sign the documents immediately. The longer we wait, the more chance she'll find a way to expose us." Hearing these words was like a punch to the gut for Grandfather. He realized that Sarah and Luke were not just manipulating the situation, they were actively scheming to take control of the business, using me as their pawn. The gravity of their deception hit him hard. He knew he had to act quickly to stop them. Grandfather wasted no time. He rushed back to the phone and dialed 911, his hands trembling with urgency. "Please, you have to help me. My granddaughter is being held against her will by my daughter and her new husband. They're trying to force her into giving them control of the family business. They're in my house right now." The operator's calm voice was a small comfort as they assured Grandfather that help was on the way. As the minutes ticked by, the tension in the house was palpable. I remained locked in my room, my anxiety rising with each sound I heard outside. I could only hope that Grandfather's call for help would reach the right people in time. It wasn't long before the sound of sirens pierced the night, growing louder with each passing second. The police arrived in full force, their presence a stark contrast to the quiet conspiracy of the previous hours. I heard the commotion outside, and my heart leapt with hope. The officers moved swiftly. I could hear them shouting commands, their voices firm and authoritative. There was a loud bang as they forced open the door to my room. The sight of the officers breaking through was both a relief and a bewilderment. Their sudden appearance felt surreal, but I knew that rescue had come. One of the officers came to me immediately, his face a mask of concern. "Emma, are you all right?" he asked as he helped me out of the room. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "I'm okay. Thank you for coming." The officers quickly began to search the house. They found Sarah and Luke in the living room, their faces flushed with surprise and panic. The arrest that followed was swift and decisive. Sarah's once confident demeanor cracked, and Luke's bravado faded into frantic attempts at negotiation. "Please, you don't understand," Sarah pleaded as she was handcuffed. "This is all a misunderstanding." Luke tried to argue, but his attempts were futile against the evidence of their unlawful actions. The police arrested them both, charging them with unlawful custody, coercion, and conspiracy. I watched as they were led away, their plans dismantled and their schemes exposed. Grandfather, though deeply shaken, was a pillar of strength. He wrapped me in a comforting embrace, his eyes filled with concern and relief. "Emma, I'm so sorry. I should have acted sooner. I never imagined they would go this far." "I'm just glad you did," I said, my voice quivering. "Thank you for believing in me." The ordeal left us both exhausted, but there was a sense of justice and relief that began to settle in. With Sarah and Luke in custody, the immediate threat was over, but the road ahead would still be challenging. Grandfather and I would have to face the aftermath of their betrayal and rebuild what had been taken from us. As the police wrapped up their investigation and ensured that everything was in order, Grandfather and I sat together, trying to process the events that had unfolded. It was a moment of both triumph and heartbreak. The betrayal of my mother and her scheming husband had left deep scars, but with Grandfather's support, I was determined to face the future with resilience and strength. The days following Sarah and Luke's arrest were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and emotional recovery. The relief of being free from their manipulation was overshadowed by the deep hurt of my mother's betrayal. However, amidst the chaos, I found solace in the unwavering support of my grandfather and father, Richard. Together, we began the difficult journey of rebuilding our lives and moving forward. Grandfather and I had many conversations during that time, discussing the future of the textile firm and what it meant for us. The company was not just a business, it was a legacy that had been passed down through generations. Now, it was my responsibility to preserve it. Although the firm was valued at $150 million, the real challenge was ensuring its continued success while dealing with the emotional toll of recent events. Richard's return to my life was a mixed blessing. After the divorce from Sarah, he had stayed away, respecting the distance Sarah had imposed. But now, with Sarah in custody and the firm in my hands, Richard stepped back into the role he once held with the company. Our reunion was filled with tentative hope and a shared determination to make things right. We spent countless hours discussing strategies, reviewing business plans, and learning from the past mistakes that had led to our current situation. "Emma, I know it's been tough," Richard said one evening as we pored over the company's financials. "But I'm here now, and together, we can rebuild what was almost lost. Your grandfather believes in you, and so do I." "I appreciate that, Dad," I replied, feeling a mix of gratitude and sadness. "It's just hard to believe that Mom would go this far. I still can't wrap my head around it." "It's a hard pill to swallow," he said, his eyes reflecting the pain of our shared past. "But we have to focus on what we can control now. The business needs us, and so does Tyler." Tyler, my younger brother, had been living with my grandparents since the arrest. His distress over the situation was palpable, and he struggled to understand the complexities of our family drama. Seeing his anguish made my resolve to provide a stable and loving environment even stronger. As soon as things settled, we arranged for Tyler to move in with Richard and me. It was important for him to escape the toxic environment that Sarah and Luke had created. When Tyler arrived, he seemed both relieved and anxious. The move to our home was a significant change for him, and I knew it would take time for him to adjust. "Hey, Ty," I said as we unpacked boxes together. "I know things have been really confusing, but we're going to be okay. Dad and I are here for you, and we'll get through this together." He looked up at me with a hesitant smile. "I hope so. It's just been really hard." "It has," I agreed, "but we have each other now. We'll make sure this place feels like home." Over time, Tyler began to settle into his new routine. Richard's and my efforts to create a nurturing environment helped him feel more secure. Our family dinners, once strained and silent, became moments of genuine connection and healing. Richard and I worked to keep the business running smoothly, making sure that the scandal of Sarah and Luke's deceit didn't overshadow the company's future. In addition to managing the textile firm, I continued my studies in business management. Balancing schoolwork with the responsibilities of leading a $150 million company was challenging, but it was also empowering. I learned to navigate the complexities of leadership, making tough decisions while staying true to the values my grandfather had instilled in me. There were many sleepless nights and moments of doubt, but with each challenge, I grew stronger. The lessons I learned from managing the business, along with the support of Richard and Tyler, helped me find my footing. I began to see the textile firm not just as a legacy to protect, but as an opportunity to shape a future of my own making. As time passed, our family began to heal. Richard and I grew closer, our shared experiences forging a stronger bond between us. Tyler adapted to his new life, his laughter and energy, bringing a sense of normalcy back into our home. My role as the head of the textile firm became more than just a duty. It became a testament to my resilience and growth. Reflecting on the tumultuous journey, I realized that despite the betrayal and challenges, I had emerged stronger and more confident. The trials had tested my character, but they also revealed my capacity for resilience and leadership. The family's unity and support were the cornerstones that helped us rebuild and move forward. Looking ahead, I knew that the road would still have its hurdles. The textile industry was competitive, and the scars of our recent past would not disappear overnight. However, with the lessons learned and the support of my family, I was ready to face whatever came next. The story of our family's journey, marked by betrayal, resilience, and ultimate triumph, serves as a reminder of the power of perseverance and the strength found in unity. As I embraced my role as the head of the family business, I did so with the knowledge that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I was prepared to face them with courage and determination.